This is the bike that the legend that is Peter Sagan will be using at the 2019 Tour de France. It's his Specialized S-Works Venge. For the first time in his entire career, Peter Sagan will start the first road stage of the Tour de France wearing pretty much standard Bora Hansgrohe kit, albeit with the rainbow bands at the end of the sleeve here. And that is because he's no longer world champion, Alejandro Valverde took that last year, and he's no longer national champion because his brother Uri took it just a couple of weeks ago. But that doesn't mean he hasn't got a custom bike, of course, because he's one of the biggest champions of the sport. So S-Works and Specialized have made him this one for this year. Slightly more subtle than the one that John Canning's brought you at last year's Tour de France, which had that green glitter towards the front. Still does have the glitter, but on a much more subtle grey, and it transitions into the matte grey here at the top and right through down to the back here. Now, I don't do so many pro bikes for videos these days. I leave that to the more tech-savvy John Cannings and Angry Lou himself, Ollie Bridgewood. But I quite often get annihilated when I do one for not doing the Freehub sound test. So I'm going to get that in early doors. Ready? Here we go. The other thing I get criticised for is not doing it properly. So here we go. Right, that's enough of that. Now, along with the glitter, which I have to say does look very good in the Belgian sunshine at the moment, there are a few other subtleties in terms of this custom bike for Sagan. Of course, has his name here on the top tube. He's got his initials there at the front of the top tube too, whilst down here, which is the same as last year's bike, in fact, it's got his 3 World Championships victories written down. They were won consecutively, of course. 2015 was Richmond, 2016 was Doha, and 2017 he won it in Bergen. And I dare say, it won't be long till he wins his next one, and I'll have to add a 4th one here. This version of the Venge was released by Specialized before last year's Tour de France, so he was using that green version that John Canning showed you last year. So I won't go into too many details about what they did versus its predecessor, but just a quick run through. They've managed to make it more aerodynamic through wind tunnel tests. The frame is over 200 grams lighter than its predecessor. The fork's 25 grams, and at the bars, which I'll get onto in a minute, they saved over 100 grams, which is a lot. Like last year, Sagan is opting for a threaded ceramic speed bottom bracket as opposed to a press fit. I think basically just because it's more reliable. Speaking of reliability, on the bike is an almost complete Shimano Dura Ace Di2 group set, barring the wheels, which I'll get onto a little bit later on. I'm going to start down here at the cranks actually. 172.5 millimeters are the length that he's running. On them though are 54 and 42 tooth chain rings. Reasonably uncommon, I would say, although that said, we are seeing more and more sprinters running a 54 tooth chain ring for the flatter stages. Just inside the chain rings, he has got this K-edge chain catcher just to prevent it dropping off and hitting the bottom bracket. At the rear, here's Cassette for the flat stages, is 11 up through to 28. That will of course change during the Tour de France, as indeed could his bike, because he also has access to a Specialized S-Works tarmac for the hillier stages. Now, one thing that a lot of you commented on last year's pro bike of Peter Sagan's S-Works Venge was the fact that the Specialized 4i power meter was a rather garish orange. And I think they've listened to you, because it's now a much more subtle black, which I think is in keeping with the rest of the bike. There at the top, he's using an Aero fly stem and bars, and that stem is a whopper. I've just measured it, and by my calculations, it's 14.5 centimeters from the center of the stem cap to the center of the bars. Speaking of the bars, they measure 42 centimeters center to center at the end of the drops there. And I actually particularly like the bar end caps that Specialized have provided here. On those bars, he's also got the satellite shifters so that he can change gears whilst he's sprinting in the drops. And then right at the front there, you can see his Wahoo Element bolt. That's on a particularly neat mount there at the front, which is just a single unit going back into the stem. I do like that one. Almost all the cables in this bike are hidden from view, except just a couple here coming out from the bars, and they go underneath the stem here and just into this headset spacer before they go down into the frame. The other very neat thing about this bike is where the Di2 junction box is hidden. Not anywhere near the stem, it is in fact in the Aero seat post behind here, so you can barely see it. On the top of that seat post is an S-Works Romin Evo saddle with the FACT carbon rails. Height of the saddle, 76 centimetres just over from the centre of the bottom bracket to the tip here. And now he's running a 56 centimetre frame, which is the same as, of course, he's had for quite some time. Lots of pro riders, as we all know, will downsize one frame size to just more aerodynamics and also to get a little bit more stiffness. But he is quite a tall chap, actually. Just bumped into him after his training ride and looked his stats up, 1m84, which is a little over 6 foot. Let's move on to the wheels now, which come from Specialized in-house brand Roval. The ones that he's got on this bike, which is in fact his spare bike with the number 2 on the back here, are the CLX 64 deep section ones, and mounted onto them are a pair of S-Works turbo tubular tyres with the Gripton compound. Now I can't actually find a size of them on here, but to me they look like 25mm. As you can well see, Sagan is running disc brakes on this bike. At the front there, we've got a 160mm rotor from Shimano, whilst at the rear it's only 140, and they're both flat mount calipers. Beyond that, I don't think I've mentioned the pedals yet. He's running Shimano Dura Ace there too. These are the R9100 version, which is the newest one. He's also got tacks, bottles and cages. The one measurement I haven't given you just yet is his reach from the tip of the saddle here to the centre of the bars, and given that humongous stem, it's a long reach. 62 centimetres is what I've just measured it at. He's a tall bloke, but that's a big stretch. Right, now I normally would give you the weight of the bike, but unfortunately, Ollie Bridgewood nicked my scales this morning to do a couple of pro bikes himself, so I can't tell you the weight. I know that last year it came in at 7.46 kilos, and I think it might be slightly lighter because there seems to be a little bit less paint, but it will be around about that. What's going to be interesting is to see how long it is before he wins his first stage and how long it is before he goes into a green jersey. I guess we'll see, which is exactly what he's got written down here underneath the bottom bracket. Right, let us know what you think of Sagan's 2019 Tour de France bike in the comments section just down below. And if you can't get enough of your Tour de France tech, you can find our latest video just over there.